So the next section we'll be looking at is chapter 4-5. It's all about completing the square. So what does that mean to complete the square? Right, well, we've been solving quadratic equations in previous sections of the chapter. And most of the time, the first equations that they give you are usually like perfect squares. Like you can find factors, two things that multiply that equal to that thing. But what if you can't? What if it's not a perfect square, so you can't just, take the square root of one of those numbers and there it is. So we're going to learn a method called completing the square to do that. So let's look at the notes here. Completing the square is just used to solve quadratic equations. So yet another method in case, you're having trouble completing the square or something is just, it's not working out. All right, so let's take, for example, if they give you this x squared plus 16x is equal to 9. Well, in this particular case, I can move the 9 over on this side. And then remember what we did? We said, well, what are all the things that multiply to give me 9? 1 times 9, 3 times 3, 9 times 1, etc. But remember, to get this middle term, I would have to add one of those two, right? One of those pairs. So 9 plus 1, because it was 9 times 1, 9 plus 1 wouldn't do it. 3 plus 3 is 6, and 9 plus 1. So, whoa, how do I factor this, right? I don't have a method yet. So this is where you can use the completing the square idea. So what you do is you say, okay, so x squared plus 16x plus what? So a box, so something. Can I ignore the 9 for right now? Just pretend that there's no 9 right there. Can I put something in that box? Let's pretend the box was empty. So that if I had that number there, I would be able to actually factor this. So I could start by saying, you know what? Let's look at this number right here. What are two numbers that add together that give me that number? Oh, wait a minute, 8 plus 8, right? So if 8 plus 8 gives me this, what's 8 times 8? 64. So if I were to put the 64 here, now, let's just ignore this stuff. Let's just look at this side right here. How could I factor this? It would be x times x would give me x squared. 8 times 8 gives me that 64. And then how do I get 16? Well, it's 8 plus 8. So bingo, those would be my factors, the x plus 8 squared. Because in other words, it would be x plus 8 times x plus 8. Perfect, that would do it. Well, I can't just magically plug in a 64 in mathematics, right? You have to do stuff that's legal. Well, then maybe I can. If I do something to the left, just do it to the right. So if you notice, as long as you add 64 to both sides, you're perfectly fine. So that's what I did here. I added 64 to this side, so now let's do it to this side. Well, I had a 9 there, right, from the original equation. What's 9 plus 64? 73. So just write it down, and there you have it. Now you've been able to factor your quadratic equation, and now you can actually solve for x a little bit easier. Take square root of both sides. That gives you 8x plus 8 equals whatever the square root of that is, and then move the 8, and there you have your x. You can solve it quickly. So let's look at your packet. In your packet, section 4-5, about completing the square, here are some examples. And so we continue looking at, how to solve these. So if you look at slide 11, we'll see that it says to solve the x squared plus 14x plus 49 is equal to 64, but just use the square root, right? So I think this one's a pretty straightforward one because I could already see that 7 times 7 is 49, 7 plus 7 is 14. So therefore x plus 7 squared would be the factors right here for this side, and then you got the 64. Well, if I take the square root of both sides, that leaves me x plus 7. And remember, if you take the square root of 64, it's either the positive 8 or the negative 8, right? Because 8 times 8 is 64. Negative 8 times negative 8 is also 64. So it's either one or the other. And so what is your x value equal to? We'll subtract 7 from both sides or move it from here to this way. So you end up with x is equal to plus or minus 8 minus 7. And so you have your two roots. Remember, every time we're trying to solve for quadratic equations, we're looking for the roots, the zeros, x-intercepts, etc. So again, it shows you you know, how to solve those and stuff. In one case, you subtract the 7 from the positive 8, and in the other one, it's -7, -8. Remember, you have those two cases, the positive 8 and the -8. So you've got some more examples here for you to do. I see kind of the same pattern here. This, the square root of 64 is 8, and 8 plus 8 is 16. The only thing you got to be careful, it's a -16. So instead of dealing with a +8, I think you're probably going to be dealing with a -8, right? Because -8 times -8 is still 64. So again, you know, the rest are there for you with some answers. Now, it does show you a little example with a graphing calculator that you can try. So again, you can try to use your Desmos, or if you have one of the TI Nspires, you can go ahead and try to approximate to get that view there. So again, more examples for you to work on. So continue doing that. In your packet, you should have some information on completing the square, like how it's done, what the step is. And remember what we did, it shows you here in this section right here, it shows you how to find that number. And so remember what I did? I said, well, let me look at it. Like if I have something like this, all I do is take that number here divided by 2 and square it. That should give you that C that you're looking for, that number that you want to use to make it a complete, to complete the square. So let's look at this, you know, without looking at the answers or anything. But if I look at this just real quick, I say, well, let's see. So what times what is 12? Well, 6 times 2, 3 times 4, etc. Well, to get a 4 here, I would need a negative, let's see, a positive 6 and a -2 possibly might work. But we're gonna, it says to do it by completing the square. Okay, so let's follow those steps. So what is my method? Remember, move this 12 over this side. There it is. Once your 12 is over here, then you can do looking at this number and say, okay, so what would make this a perfect square? So let's pretend the -12 isn't there. Like in this case right here, it already moved to the right. And we look at this side. So what's missing? Well, what's the rule? You take this number divided by 2. So 4 divided by 2 is 2. And then 2 squared is 4. Oh, so I would need a 4 there. Remember, if you add a 4 here, and see it gives you the instructions here, then you got to add it to the other side. There it is. So here is my completing the square, and there you go. Now you have a perfect square on, so you can have the factors. It's x squared times, x plus 2 times x plus 2, which it's x plus 2 squared. And that equals to 12 plus 4, which is 16. So again, just the completing the square is not really a difficult task. It's just a lot of practice and doing it to get good at that. So again, more examples for you to practice on. So now let's go ahead and go to the actual practice problems. So if you'll notice here in your study guide and intervention, you've got a few more notes and kind of telling you about the square root, you know, and taking it and what you do and some properties and so on and so forth. So again, go ahead and continue practicing on those. So let's go ahead and look at these. So now, if you notice these problems in the exercises, it's asking you to use the square root property, which is here. So it's really trying to find the square roots of this side. So let's go ahead and do that. So let me just grab my pen, and so we can follow the example that's up here, kind of do the same thing down here. All right, so they want you to use a square root property, so I'm going to go ahead and take this and try to find, is there something over here that I can multiply times itself to give me that stuff like this right here, because the other side is just a 49. So I'm going to keep, 49. All right. So let's look at that. Okay, well, automatically remember, you say, okay, what times what gives me that number? I know that 9 times 9 would do it, but also a -9 times a -9. So this could be either positive or negative. Well, I'm kind of thinking it's going to be negative, and let me tell you why. Because how do you get this middle number? You get this middle number by adding these. Well, what's -9 and -9? When you add them, you get a -18. So bingo, these are the numbers I'm looking for. So my factors here, it's x minus 9 to the second power is equal to 49. Okay, and let me see if I can clean that up just a tad, because it looks like I made a little bit of a mess. So let me try to get rid of that and make it look a little clearer. Okay, so now I'm dealing with x minus 9 squared is equal to 49. We're using the square root property. So if you notice, we're at that stage right here. I just have to take the square root of each of these sides so that I can see how much like the x actually equals to. So let's take the square root. So I'm going to write my answer up here, okay, because I'm running out of room down here. Okay, so then if I do that, the square root of x minus 9 squared, so like the square root of something squared, it's just the thing, right? So this just turns into x minus 9 is equal to. Now remember, what is the square root of 49? Well, before from elementary, you would have probably just said, oh, a positive 7, miss. Well, yeah, you're right. It is positive 7, but we also have another case, right? What about the negative 7s? Because negative 7 times negative 7 is 49. So that could have also been the case. So we've got two situations. X is going to equal to, see, we move this 9 this way. It was minus 9, so it becomes a plus 9. So now x can either equal to 9 minus 7, which is 2, or x can equal to 9 plus 7, and which is 16. So in case you notice, you could have two possible answers, right? So the solution set, and notice how they wrote it. The solution set is 9 and negative 1. So guess what I'm going to do? So the solution is 2, 16. And I'm done. So if you continue looking at the study guide and intervention problems, same thing. They're asking you to continue, but now they want you to complete the square. So, so to continue doing that, remember to complete the square, there's a particular thing you do. You take that middle number, divide it by 2, and then square it, and I think you'll be there. So let me just kind of start you off on one of these. So it says by completing the square. So I automatically say, okay, ooh, wait a minute, like this 65 is not, because there's so many things that if I multiply equals 65, but then to get a small number like 8, I don't think that's going to work, right? So let me go ahead and start the process. X squared minus 8x is equal to, I'm going to leave that blank because I need something here. And I'm going to move my 65 this way, so it becomes a plus 65. So now I say to myself, all right, so then I need something that when I square it, I can get, it's going to be related to this number. So what's the rule? Just take this number right here, divided by 2, and so that's 4, and then square it. So 4 squared, so 16. Now you got to be a little careful here because I did notice this is a negative 8. It's not positive, right? So I need to make sure that I write the correct thing. If I do negative 4 times negative 4, I get a positive 16. Negative 4 plus negative 4, I get that negative 8. So yay, I think I found what I need. So now we continue the process. Now I can factor this thing right here. What are the factors? It's x minus 4 times x minus 4. So it's 2 of them, right? And that is going to be equal to your 65. And then you want to solve it or do other things, whatever they ask you. But I think it just said to complete the square, and we've pretty much done that as well. So again, you'll have more here. Remember the square root property. So you need to do that thing we did earlier. And then don't forget the square root is positive, negative. So you can practice some of those questions. And then here you try to make it a perfect square. So they're kind of like, what number do you have to put here? What's the rule? Take this number, divide it by 2, square it, and that's your C pretty much. And so, of course, solve equations by completing the square as well.